The Lord is our light and our salvation. May his light be felt in this space as the enlightenment of truth and the radiance of joy. So Shabbat Shalom. Great to see everyone. Hey, Sissy, good to see you. Alexandra, great to see you. Rebecca, good to see you as well. So tonight we're going to look at what does abide look like. Now, there's a word that you don't normally use in conversation, right? Hey, are you going to go abide tonight? And so it's an unusual English word, but it's a really powerful word. Psalm 91 and verse 1 says, "You who live," and that Hebrew word is the word yashab, "in the shelter of Elyon," or the Lord, "who spend your nights in the shadow of Shaddai." Is that not a cool phrase? The shadow of Shaddai. So in this verse we read there's this sort of sense of living, yashab, in a shelter of Adonai, in the shadow of Shaddai. So Yeshua continues with this same concept here. And we read about these words in John chapter 15 and verses 1 through 5. Now, I've condensed that and just given you some of the key thoughts here that we're going to talk about tonight. "I am the real vine, and my Father is the gardener. Every branch which is part of me but fails to bear fruit, he cuts off. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it may bear more fruit. Right now, because of the word which I have spoken to you, you are pruned. Stay united with me, as I will with you. For just as the branch can't put forth fruit by itself apart from the vine, so you can't bear fruit apart from me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who stay united with me and I with them are the ones who bear much fruit. Because apart from me, you cannot do a thing." And so this is a text here that very much connects with that Psalm 91 verse 1 concept. "I am the real vine, and my Father is the gardener. Stay united with me as I will with you. Those who stay united with me and I with them are the ones who bear much fruit." So now this is a verse in the Brit Chadasha, the New Testament. So this is the Greek word for abide is meno, and it means to remain in relation to a place, not to depart. So in other words, you remain in a place and you don't depart from that place. In relation to time, it is to continue to be present in a state of being, to remain as one, and to wait for one. So in Hebrew, like always, hey Jean, great to have you join us. Shabbat Shalom. In Hebrew, like always, there's always this richer meaning than all the other languages. Psalm 91, when we go back to that word, yashab, that we read earlier, the ancient Hebrew pictographs, which are the word pictures that came before the actual Hebrew letters, really give us some insight, some visual to this word, yashab, for abide. It is the letter yod, which is the picture of the arm, and that means working. It is the letter shin, which is the picture of teeth, which means to consume or to press. And it is the picture of bet, which is actually a picture of a tent, which means a home. So when we kind of boil this down as far as what the words show us, it means to work or to work to press home. So work to press home. And the concept of yashab in Hebrew scripture means to dwell, to settle, to inhabit, to sit, to continue, to be still, and to remain. To settle oneself down in the place called home. So you can yashab for the night or for longer periods of time. Yashab is actually about a state of being. So it's a little bit deeper than that Greek word meno, right? which has to do with either a time or a place. It's multi-dimensional, of course, like Hebrew language is. And I love that concept, obviously. Sorry, Rebecca. Rebecca says I don't have much of a time of attention span tonight. Abide, Rebecca. You're checking out too early. So Yeshab is working to stay home. Yet the whole picture of the followers of Yeshua is one of being fluid. So, right? I mean, that's the concept that we see. It's about the disciples of Jesus always were taught to be fluid. So this thought of abiding as it relates to living in the vine does not necessarily mean literally sticking to one physical place. It's more about a spiritual intention. Staying put is being home in Him. So let me ask you this question, and maybe you already have this figured out. I don't know. Maybe not. How do you stay put in someone you can't see? So while you're maybe commenting on that, I just want to recap this portion of Scripture where Yeshua is speaking to His followers. The Father is the vine dresser, He says. Yeshua is the vine, and we, His followers, are the branches. The branches are designed to be connected to the vine, which is actually more like the trunk, okay, in order to bear fruit. Now, two things we know to be true about Scriptures, and we've learned this on multiple occasions. The first one is what we're told to do, we can do. So in other words, when we read that the Lord tells us to do something, it means that we can do it. So if you're told to abide to something that sometimes feels abstract, invisible, unclear, just know we can. There's a way we can abide, even when sometimes it feels a little unclear about how we do that. Jean says, know God's voice. So, and that would suggest to know it would suggest that you can hear it. So you've got your ears working, you've got your ears in tune, which really connects with what we're going to be talking about tonight. The second thing we know, so first we know if we're told to do it, we can do it. The second thing we know to be true is that the Bible was written for us, but not to us. So in relating to what is written, we always need to ask ourselves, what does this mean to the people that were hearing these words, or the people that the Scriptures were written to? In other words, when the prophets were writing to someone, or Paul was writing to the churches, or whatever it is, what did it mean to the hearer of the teacher saying it, or the reader of people reading the letters? And that's very important. Alexandra says Bible reading on a daily basis, which is really good, absolutely. And talking to people, also really good. When we connect with the words of the Lord, and when we connect to the other people in the community, we're able to connect more with the unseen, right? Because these are tangible things we can do. So there are some brilliant tools. Knowing if we're told to do it, we can do it. And what did it mean to the people it was being spoken to, or the people it was being written to at the time? There are some brilliant tools that rabbis use to teach. And these are ancient tools, and these are also tools that we see today. One tool is to connect the readers or the listeners with other stories that use the same words and phrases and images. So students who know and have been trained by rabbis will always ask when they hear a rabbi talk, what is happening here midrashically? In other words, what is this connected to? Yeshua did this all the time. He said things that the followers would right away go, oh, that connects us to Moses, that connects us to David. So they're always going to ask, where have we heard this phrase or have seen this picture before? And that's a very important concept. Disconnect from outside distractions, Diana's saying, very important, right? And how do we do that? How are we like living our lives and somehow disconnecting? How do we stay present? This is the right answer. It's very challenging to walk out, right? So when Yeshua says, again, we're talking about these phrases, where have I heard this before? Where have I seen this picture before? When Yeshua says, I am the vine, what did that mean to the listeners? So let's relate this to both of those two teaching tools, okay? What did it mean to the listeners, and where have I heard this before? So where else is I am mentioned? You may think right away of Yahweh says it to Moses, right? In Exodus 3:14. I'm sure you connected right there. Ea Asher Ea. I am or will be what I am or will be. And then he condenses it to Ea, I am or I will be. And this sounds a little confusing in English, but basically what this means is he is everywhere, he is all as he chooses to be. He is everywhere, he is all as he chooses to be. And that's really key in being able to abide. Yeshua connects to this I am thought. Not replacing the Father. This is not a Jesus-only statement, as some people believe. Jesus is not replacing the Father. He's making this statement, but he's connecting to the Father because Yeshua is doing the Father's work. The Father is the gardener expressed through the vine, which is him, right? So Yeshua's message in this is really quite powerful. And again, let's just contemplate this for a little bit because it's not normally how we Greek Western English speakers talk. But in a sense, and I'm taking my liberty, this is like the God Speaks project that Shabazz does, right? Yeshua is saying with these words we're about ready to read, and in the vine, I am everything, I am this. And he points to things. I am everywhere, I am here. And this is really a dense, layered way to relate to the Lord. And when we do that, we have an easier time abiding. So let's look at some other I am statements that Yeshua made while he walked on this earth as a man. And they were all involving very familiar images that were tied to events going on around him and his Talmudim, his disciples. So he feeds over 5,000 people, right? And right after that miracle in John 6:35, he says, I am the bread which is life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and whoever trusts in me will never be thirsty. When he and his disciples were at the temple during the Feast of the Tabernacle in John 8:12, he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light which gives life. In John 10:9, they were looking out over the hills where there were shepherds tending their sheep, and Yeshua says, I am the gate. If someone enters through me, he will be safe, and he will go in and out and find pasture. In John 10:11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Just before raising Lazarus from the dead in John 11:25, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. At Passover Seder, he warns his followers about what was coming next, and they didn't quite understand him. And finally, Thomas says, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? And Yeshua takes this opportunity to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life in John 14:6. So again, he's putting himself, I am, all over their world. Another teaching tool is to use the tangible images, the practices, the culture around them to illuminate, which is what he's doing. And this was an agrarian society, so agricultural images, everyone would have gotten the concept. So it would kind of be the same for us today, because I know sometimes we have a hard time. Hey, Randall, great to see you, understanding these agricultural concepts. But let's say you lived in Astoria, Queens, as I did, and I wanted to teach you about the many and unpredictable routes we take in life to get wherever you want to go, okay? And I may tell you a story about living on 31st Avenue and 41st Street and trying to get home on the subway at midnight, right? Do you take the M and do you walk? Do you take the N and Q and then it shoots your stop and then you got to take another one back? And or do you go over too far and then you take a bus? You have to go all the way to Jamaica and come back. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to get home, but you never quite know what's going to happen when it's in the middle of the night, right? So that would be an example of someone who would be trying to teach a simple truth, and they would use that thing that everyone would say, oh yeah, I get it. I know what that means. I understand. This is how the Bible was written to people that understood fishing and agriculture and desert. So this common way of rabbinic teaching, using everyday events and elements to illuminate, is making it tangible. The Lord who is everywhere in everyday life. I am. And this is what Yeshua is saying. And he, again, is connecting to the I am statement of the Lord. Madeline L'Engle says, there is nothing so secular that it cannot be sacred. And I love this because we always want to divide, right, what's in the world with what's holy. There is nothing so secular that it cannot be sacred. And that is one of the deepest messages of the incarnation. And that is just such a profound thought, and I absolutely concur. Because we see the sacred everywhere in our world. The vine is found wherever the gardener has him. So I want you to track with that. The vine is found wherever the gardener has him. And then the vine nourishes the branches. The branch's purpose is to bear fruit. That's us. Our purpose is to bear fruit. And we cannot do that without the vine. Not only that, but when branches try to bear fruit without the vine, they have no life in them. They have no life in the fruit. You can't make life in the fruit. You can't produce fruit at all. And if you would, it would be dried up and shriveled up because the life comes from the vine. Have you ever known someone like that? Doing the good things, but without any life? Something's a little bit off. Something's missing. Have you ever been that person where you're trying hard to do good in the world, but you just don't have the life, and whatever you give to people, it just doesn't do anything? What are we missing with our sincere hearts to serve Yahweh in the world? It could be the life source of the vine, which is only found in him, anywhere and everywhere, which is what the text says, he wants to be. So this is where we begin with abiding, finding the vine where he wants to be found. In the midst of sending his Talmudim, teaching them that this is this important truth in this metaphor, in the middle of this text we read in John 15, something a little unusual comes out, right? It seems like it's a bit out of context. In verse 3, he says, you are pruned because of the word spoken in you. What's that about? Do you ever just read things and just say, not tracking with that? And again, so we have to ask ourselves, what does this mean? You are pruned because of the word spoken in you. And why is it important for the disciples, for the followers, for the Talmudim of Yeshua to be pruned? What connects with that? How do I midrashically relate to that? Well, Leviticus 19:23 through 25 says, when you come into the land and plant any kind of tree for food, then you shall regard its fruit as forbidden. So a little bit of backstory. When the people of God were going to come into the promised land, when they first entered into that land, the first fruit was forbidden. The text goes on and says, 3 years it shall be forbidden to you. It must not be eaten. And in the 4th year, all its fruit shall be holy, an offering of praise to the Lord. But in the 5th year, you may eat of its fruit to increase its yield for you. I am the Lord your God. So what happened was you do anything with the fruit the first 3 years. The 4th year, you were to take all the fruit to the temple as an offering. And the 5th year was when you ate. So they were not to harvest the fruit when they first came into the promised land for the first 3 years. That was called the Oriah fruit, which means uncircumcised. And by leaving the vine unharvested for 3 years, the harvest will be increased. And among many Orthodox communities, even today, this law is applied to children's hair, which is not cut until their 3rd birthday. So here's the message from Yeshua about abiding in him to bear fruit. And it's also why we see a lot of the frustration with the disciples, right? They were wanting to do things, and they were doing things, but they felt like, man, we could do more, we could do better. And you saw a lot of bickering and all kinds of shenanigans going on with them. And so when you're entering into a new place, there's a season of waiting until the harvest is able to be used. For 3 years, the master walked and talked with the disciples. This was their time of preparation. They were unpruned and they were unharvested. At the Last Supper, he tells them that this time is over. They were pruned because of the word they heard, and it was time to begin sharing their fruit. Luke 6:40 says, a Talmud is not above his rabbi, but each one, when he is fully trained, will be like his rabbi. So what do we learn from this? The way fruit is harvested is as important as the fruit itself. The vine through the branch is how the fruit is made, right? The vine cannot produce fruit without the branches. The branches cannot grow fruit without the vine, and the fruit cannot be harvested without the vine dresser, the Father. And this is the mystery of God's relationship with humanity. And let me know if you've thought about that. Sonia, I am so happy to see you, honey. Good to have you join us. Shabbat Shalom. What was... Oh, Alexander is saying, I think it's the 8th day. That's the circumcision. Yeah, 8th day is the circumcision. Yep. Oh, there's all kinds of cool stuff on that number, 8 too. 8 is a cool number. So let me see thumbs up, or maybe a heart, or whatever symbol you want to use, a wow, or whatever symbol you want to use, if you are completely blown away about the fact of this relationship, the fact of this interdependent relationship where the Father and the Son and us are all connected in such a way where there can be no fruit without us. That's crazy. There can be no fruit without us. Now, there can be no fruit in us unless we're in the vine. And there can be no fruit that's reaped unless the Father comes to do it. It's a completely communal, relational process. And here's the big thing about that 3-year thing. This is why this is so important. And I believe why Yeshua probably put this in there. We don't rush. We wait for the process. We don't panic. We abide. And I know that's hard to do sometimes, but we abide. And that's the point of Psalms and of John 15. So there is an abiding that produces fruit. There's an abiding that produces fruit. And in order to really understand what that abiding is and to practice it, we have the invitation to be co-creators. Exactly, Alexandra. Phoebe's saying, so easy to relate here with grapes and berry and vine. Oh yeah, Phoebe is in California in wine country. So absolutely to Phoebe, no problem at all because she sees it play out in her real life. So when we abide, and here's when we get into the nitty gritty, and let me see your comments here. When we abide, again, that abiding produces fruit in the world. We see that the work of abiding is connection. So an intentional seeing the I am, wherever and however he chooses to be. Now, we want to put him in a box. We want to say, no, I want to see you here. I want to see you this way. I want to know you like this. I want to hear you speak in this way. Jean said it in the beginning, to know his voice. And I don't know if you've discovered this. I certainly have. But boy, that voice comes in so many ways, doesn't it? But when Jean says to know it, that's the important part. So if I hear his voice in my heart, if I hear it in a dream, if I hear it in my next door neighbor, little boy who may be 7, if I hear it when someone's yelling at me in their car and as they're passing me, I can hear all kinds of things that God wants to tell me through all kinds of vehicles. He chooses to be. Remember, we did that in the beginning. I am wherever and however he chooses to be. And that takes work. And that's why when we looked at that word picture, there was the yod in it. To abide takes work. The fruit bearing is not actually the hard part. You don't have to do a thing to bear fruit. Not a thing. The abiding is what takes the work. This requires you to be present in the moment. In the moment. To be seeing, to be hearing, to be feeling, to be aware, to be intentional. And that is not easy. I was talking to somebody today who we were celebrating a big victory for him, because what he was telling me was he noticed some bad patterns that were happening with a relationship he was in. And he's such a type A person and so vision oriented and goal oriented. And before he would just blow through things and then try to pick up the mess and then try to sort of change the system so it wouldn't happen again, which is cool, but there's an even deeper thing we can do. We can be so fully present in the moment that we're not making a mess, that we see it before it becomes a mess. And he did that. And he made some changes right away, and he actually took some things off everyone's plates, which is a hard thing for a type A person to do, right? Overachiever to do. But he did it because he noticed it right away. And my first response to him is, we have to celebrate this because you were intentionally abiding. You noticed it as it was happening. And that's to be fully present in the moment. And that takes work. Do you find that hard? And have you found ways to really be intentional about abiding? Number 2, and I want to see what works for you. Number 2 is the way of abiding is rest. And we see that in the definition of abiding. Once you're home in him, when you find that, you rest in that. And when I say rest, I don't mean like a Sabbath rest. I mean that you just settle into it. Okay? You park. You go deep in it. And remember, there's work in the rest too. We want to pop out of the rest. The rest simply speaks of digging deep and resting in him. So let me see your ways of how you do that. Sometimes people, I was talking to somebody today and I suggested that because when his brain spins so much and goes so into familiar patterns, and we were trying meditation and that didn't really work because at that point he was so out of control with his brain. So we talked about him getting up and doing jumping jacks. And I know that sounds funny, but what it does is start pumping the blood all over, it diverts your attention, does all kinds of things with your neural pathways, and it kind of jogs you out of it so that you can be fully present in the moment and you don't have a runaway brain. So do you find any of those things that work for you? Jean is saying, I was reminded that I hear God's voice in my voice when I let God in. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so cool, isn't it? Do you ever find yourself talking to somebody or praying and all of a sudden you hear yourself saying something and you think, oh man, I could have never thought of that in a million years. That was definitely the Lord speaking to me there. That happens a lot, right? He speaks through you. So again, Psalm 91:1 says, you who live, yashab, the Hebrew word yashab, in the shelter of Elyon, who spend your nights in the shadow of Shaddai. And this is our takeaway tonight. Something to really, I'm going to post this obviously, but it's something really to kind of sink into. To abide in the shadow of Shaddai is to be where he is, no matter where we are. To abide in the shadow of Shaddai is to be where he is, no matter where we are. And again, this is a deep truth. And so for us to really let it sink in, we really have to meditate on this. We really have to think about this. No matter where we find ourselves, that is where we're abiding in the shadow of Shaddai to find him. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I love you all. And we will talk shortly. By the way, Andre is up again in 2 weeks. And so we're going to hear from him again in 2 weeks, which is good. And if any of you have any thoughts about how to help each other in order to get into this intentional place of abiding and seeing and hearing and being mindful about where he is, because he is in all these things, please keep the comments going even after we sign off, okay? Shabbat Shalom. Love you.